At exactly 2:59 local time, June 6, 2025, 23 Ukrainian ZRAK-52 drones crossed the 300-meter radar dead zone outside Engels Air Base. The final stretch of a 720 kilometers journey flown entirely in radio silence. No satellites. No uplink. No fallback. For the last 45 minutes, the drones have been entirely on their own. No orders. No control. Just machine logic and prior mission data burned into memory. The group isn't flying in formation, at least not in the human sense. Each drone charts its own course based on terrain following radar and passive EM scans. These are autonomous hunter-killers, not remote-control toys. For the last 6 hours, they've navigated using a mix of LiDAR altimetry, visual SLAM from terrain contours, and a star tracker borrowed from a Chinese telescope kit. That's right, while Russian air defenses were searching for GPS signatures, these things were aiming with the constellations. At this altitude, anywhere from 45 to 60 meters, they're invisible to space-based early warning radars, and beneath the minimum sweep zone of the massive S-400 radar arrays that dot Russia's strategic defense belt. But physics isn't political. The lead drone's onboard AI is now running object recognition routine number 91 oil infrastructure schema against the thermal imagery of the target area. The fuel depot is faint but visible, 6 large tanks in a crescent arc, with a pair of smaller drums and a substation stacked like a game of battleship. Each drone carries a neural net trained on battlefield fuel signatures. Not just shapes, but heat gradients, pressure patterns, stress fatigue on weld lines. They've ingested over 8 terabytes of satellite captures and drone footage to learn not just what tanks look like, but how they fail. One by one, the drones identify targets by volatility index. The AI factors fuel temperature, solar exposure, tank fill levels, and vapor feedback from passive infrared to score each structure. Tank #A7 pings highest, meaning it's both recently filled and highly flammable. A soft kill is not enough. These drones aren't just going for fire, they're going for a chain reaction. And here's where it gets elegant. Every drone shares no direct link, but each one runs a locally cached copy of the same attack coordination software. Through synchronized clock timing and sensor comparison, they align their runs, autonomously. No voting. No quorum. Just parallel decision-making with identical conclusions. By 3:01, the attack matrix is set. 7 drones will hit the tops of tanks to penetrate vapor domes. 8 will come in at a shallow angle for structural compromise near valves and pressure joints. The remaining 8 are kamikaze ECM units, decoys loaded with radar jammers and heat blooms to draw fire and sow chaos. Their approach angles are diversified. Each drone picks a separate bearing, offset by just 3 degrees, to avoid collisions and maximize overlap on explosion radii. A perfect storm in motion. The kill box is locked. At 3:02, a slight flicker registers on the Russian EW console 2.7 kilometers northeast of Engels Base. It's dismissed as a momentary ghost, likely ground clutter or interference from the nearby high-voltage lines. The operator yawns, taps the screen, and marks it for review. He's about to miss the biggest failure of his career. Engels is supposedly protected by a layered defense network. The flagship S-400 Triumph battery perched on a hill near Prysnoe, backed by a Triumph M command trailer with real-time satellite feeds, a pair of TORM-2S scanning short-range vectors, and 3 Panzer S-2 systems covering the final perimeter with both missiles and autocannons. But none of it is seeing the drones. Because the drones aren't fighting stealth with stealth, they're fighting perception with deception. 10 minutes earlier, 8 decoy drones broke formation and began broadcasting broadband RF noise in the X-band and Q-band, exactly where Panzer and TOR radars operate. These jammers don't scream, they whisper, emitting soft, randomized pulses just strong enough to trigger false positives and sow uncertainty. The Panzer systems begin tracking what they think are fast-moving objects diving toward the base from high altitude. In reality, they're reacting to reflections of their own emissions bounced off the belly of a flying lawnmower. Meanwhile, the S-400's 92 and 6E radar beam sweeps like a lighthouse. Its phased array is calibrated to track Mach 2 cruise missiles and stealth bombers over 200 kilometers out. The drones, flying at 50 meters AGL and 148 kilometers per hour, fall right through its blind spot. They're too slow, too low, and thanks to Russian radar curvature limitations, effectively beneath the horizon. By 3:03, the only thing detecting the swarm is a single, outdated visual optical sensor mounted on the eastern perimeter. It catches the glint of rotor blades against a sodium light reflection. But the operator sees only shadows. The automated classification system tags them as avian anomaly probable geese. Inside the TORM-2 command cabin, the operator does something unthinkable. He reboots the targeting array. Not because of enemy action, but because the system is stuttering. Ghost targets keep popping up, vanishing, then returning 100 m away. The decoy drones are feeding it a buffet of falsified reflections, carefully spaced to simulate aircraft zigzagging through the valley. The Pantsir's 2S are equally confused. Their fire control systems rely on identifying radar cross-sections above 0.1 square meters. The ZRAK-52s come in at 0.009, smaller than a pigeon, lighter than a bike helmet, and covered in radar-absorbing matte plastic that scatters energy instead of reflecting it. To make matters worse, the drones broadcast thermal flares from the ECM units, mimicking the heat signature of turbojet exhaust. One system triggers its auto-engage protocol. It fires. A $400,000 57 times 10 to the power of 6 missile chases a $100 drone decoy emitting nothing but a butane-heated filament. The missile explodes midair, showering the night sky with burning shards. Russian ground crews cheer until they realize they've destroyed a ghost. At 3:04, the drones are now 9 kilometers out. They drop altitude again, now flying nap of the Earth. The nearest radar can't see below 40 m due to signal clutter. The thermals are confused by spoofed flares. Communications are jammed. Visual identification systems are blinded by coordinated strobe pulses mounted on the drone noses, emitting 5,000 lumens of white flash at 12 Hz. It's like trying to photograph a lightning strike with a 1998 webcam. The defenders aren't just blind. They're deaf. Their network is overloaded, flooded with contradictions. No clear lock. No confirmed trajectory. No valid engagement range. They know something's coming, but they can't see it, can't track it, and worst of all, they can't stop it. At 3 hours 5 minutes and 16 seconds, the lead ZU-52 drone crosses the 5 kilometers perimeter. Its altimeter ticks down to 38 meters. At this altitude, the curvature of the Earth hides it from most radar beams. Even the high-gain radar units meant for ballistic missile defense can't see a microwave-sized object hugging the ground. Its AI executes Run Delta 9, the final attack profile. The drone has now entered what the Ukrainian programmers call ghost mode. Every sensor reading is cached locally. Every maneuver is locked. Nothing short of physical destruction will change its course. The remaining drones synchronize their clocks to a tenth of a millisecond. No wireless communication. Just clocked automation, like 23 watches wound by the same hand. At 3 hours 5 minutes and 22 seconds, inside the Engels Base Operations Center, red lights begin flashing on the threat console. A TOR system, rebooted only 90 seconds ago, finally gets a partial radar reflection of 2 drones, barely a blip, but moving in unison. Speed, 151 kilometers per hour, altitude, 40 meters. Too slow for a cruise missile, too smooth for birds. The operator hesitates for less than a second, then hits the emergency interlock override. The system fires. The 9M338K missile launches with a feral scream, punching through the cold night air at Mach 2.5. Its active seeker scans wildly, looking for an electromagnetic echo from its prey. But there's a problem. The drones are not emitting anything. No comms, no GPS, no radar. They're shadows with wings. The missile loses lock at 2.8 kilometers. It sails forward another half second, then self-destructs in a useless puff of smoke over a deserted field. The only casualty, a weather monitoring station flattened by debris. At 3 hours 6 minutes and 3 seconds. At 3 kilometers, the swarm spreads. A perfect dispersal pattern, designed to force defenders to split their fire. Some drones drop to 25 m, skimming low. Others pop up to 70 m for vertical plunges. A few peel off toward decoy targets, non-critical structures like barracks and vehicle depots. The illusion of chaos masks the core objective, the fuel tanks. At the depot itself, the fire suppression control room goes into lockdown. The safety system activates Zone Echo, its highest response protocol. In theory, this unleashes 50,000 liters of flame-retardant foam across the tanks using thermal-triggered deluge nozzles. But this isn't theory. This is 2025, and the suppression system was last inspected in 2012. The foam is expired. Some nozzles are rusted shut. One mainline pipe is already leaking from a seal fracture caused by last winter's freeze. What shows up on the control panel as ready might as well be a screensaver. At 3 hours 6 minutes and 38 seconds, the base commander, Colonel Ivanov, is awoken by his adjutant and stumbles into the operations bunker in his slippers. He stares at the screen showing 17 thermal contacts converging. Too symmetrical to be birds. Too small to be aircraft. And all moving with clockwork precision. He doesn't give an order. There's no time. What's coming can't be intercepted. Only witnessed. At 3 hours and 7 minutes. The drones reach 1.5 kilometers. The final segment of their mission begins. Each calculates the precise detonation delay based on target material, angle of incidence, and payload type. This is not just a suicide run. It's a choreography of destruction. Drone number 04 climbs sharply to 80 m, then pitches down at -36 degrees. Its onboard charge is a self-forging fragment warhead, an inverted copper cone shaped to pierce steel and ignite vapor-rich interiors. Its guidance adjusts for wind shear and thermal bloom. It's about to hit tank #A7. Drone number 09 remains low, skimming at 30 m toward tank #B3's transfer manifold, the weakest structural point on the depot. Its warhead is a thermal fragmentation mix, intended to rupture piping and ignite any flowing fuel. Drone number 17 activates its ECM package one final time, blasting out a white noise RF burst just strong enough to fry the radar front end of the nearest Panzer battery. It's a suicide jolt that lasts 2 seconds before the drone slams into the corner of the control center. At 3 hours 7 minutes and 38 seconds, the night sky lights up. At 3 hours 7 minutes and 39 seconds, drone number 04 hits first. From 80 meters up, it strikes the roof of tank A7 at a 36-degree angle, just as calculated. The shaped charge warhead detonates 0.1 seconds after initial contact. A jet of molten copper, traveling at over 8,000 meters per second, slices through the 8 mm thick steel dome like a welding torch through tinfoil. The warhead penetrates deep into the tank's vapor chamber, an enclosed space saturated with supervolatile aviation fuel fumes. What happens next is not a fire. It's not even a typical explosion. It's a fuel-air detonation, a volumetric blast where the air becomes part of the explosive. A wave of overpressure flashes out at 2,800 meters per second, creating a shockwave that shatters every window within half a kilometer. The tank roof, 15 tons of steel, is blown 120 meters into the sky like a manhole cover struck by a rocket. At 3 hours 7 minutes and 41 seconds, drone number 09 impacts tank B3's lower manifold. The warhead is smaller, but more specialized. A high-explosive fragmentation charge designed not to destroy the tank outright, but to rupture the main flow line. It works. The superheated fuel, under 18 atmospheres of pressure, begins to fountain out of the severed manifold like a geyser of death. The liquid ignites mid-air, becoming a 40-meter tall tower of flame that arches across the containment bund. At 3 hours 7 minutes and 45 seconds, 3 more drones slam into tanks C2, D6, and the western pumping station in quick succession. Each strike is precisely timed, spaced 5 seconds apart, forcing the defenders to guess which target is next, and fail every time. One drone slices into the valve access corridor. Another plummets into the foam reservoir. A third strikes a catwalk over tank C2, setting off secondary blasts as maintenance tools and stored containers ignite. At 3 hours 7 minutes and 58 seconds. Now comes the worst-case scenario the base planners in 1965 never imagined. A cascading failure. The tanks were spaced 30 meters apart to avoid sympathetic detonation. That made sense, if you were thinking about aerial bombs and fuel leaks. But these aren't steel bombs. These are thermal precision munitions with microsecond-timed detonation logic. They're designed not just to burn, but to detonate fuel mixtures in different stages, triggering one failure that feeds the next. As tank A7 erupts, its radiant heat ignites vapor leaking from B3. The entire depot becomes a daisy chain of fireballs, each blast feeding the next in a symphony of destruction. At 3 hours 8 minutes and 10 seconds, the base's fire suppression system finally kicks in. Massive deluge nozzles begin spraying foam across tanks that no longer exist. The control panel flashes green. On paper, it's all functioning perfectly. In reality, it's trying to extinguish a fireball the size of a high school gymnasium using plumbing built during the Khrushchev era. At 3 hours 8 minutes and 17 seconds, drone number 22 makes the final strike. Instead of a fuel tank, it targets the depot's switching substation, an ugly gray building tucked behind a blast wall. Its job? Power distribution to the entire refueling system. The drone's warhead is a self-shunting EFP, explosively formed penetrator, with a delay fuse. It punches through the wall, detonates inside the electrical core, and turns a room full of ceramic insulators and copper windings into a high-voltage death spiral. Every circuit on base shorts. Surveillance cameras freeze. Radio communications die. For the next 45 seconds, Engels is dark, lit only by the glow of burning fuel. At 3 hours and 9 minutes, the fire reaches tank C5. Heat has softened the dome like wax under a flame. Pressure builds. The tank steel shell begins to vibrate with harmonic stress. Then it blows. This isn't a fireball, it's a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. The tank transitions instantly from liquid to gas, multiplying its volume 1,200 times in under a second. A sonic boom rolls across the steppe. Shrapnel from the tank roof embeds itself in a troop transport 700 meters away, slicing through the steel like butter. The drone war is no longer theoretical. The $20,000 swarm just removed $3 billion worth of strategic fuel and grounded the long-range nuclear strike capability of the Russian Air Force. At 3 hours 9 minutes and 48 seconds, the final fuel tank erupts. Not with a bang, but a long, metallic groan that ends in a hiss as molten steel folds inward, collapsing like a soda can underfoot. There's nothing left to burn. The surrounding ground is scorched black. Twisted metal litters the depot like the bones of extinct giants. Engels Air Base is still technically operational. The runway is intact. The hangars untouched. The perimeter fence still stands. But it might as well have been erased from the Russian strategic map, because without fuel, the Tu-95MS and Tu-160 bombers parked neatly in their shelters are nothing more than museum pieces. They weren't the targets. They never needed to be. Ukraine didn't waste drones on hardened hangars or decoy aircraft shells. Instead, they struck the bottleneck, the logistical heart of long-range operations. Without that fuel, no plane leaves the ground. Not today. Not for weeks. The special high-altitude blend stored here, designed for sub-zero temperatures and 13,000-meter cruise altitudes, takes months to refine and distribute. It's not available at civilian airports. It's not interchangeable with commercial kerosene. And it's gone. At 3:12. In Moscow, a defense ministry aide delivers the first situation report to a senior general. He reads the summary twice. No GPS interference. No electronic trail. No manned control post engagement. Target logic independent. Simultaneous multi-angle detonation. Fuel depot destroyed. Strategic bombers grounded indefinitely. He doesn't say a word. He picks up the phone. Then puts it back down. There's no one to call. What happened at Engels is over. But the implications are just beginning. At 3:18. At Shaykovka Air Base, 740 kilometers west of Engels, an emergency briefing convenes. Base engineers scramble to inspect fuel storage. Fire trucks are parked beside every depot. Riflemen deployed to watch the skies. Not for saboteurs, but for shadows. At Olenia and Ukrainka bases, the same playbook is followed. Reinforce tank armor. Check deluge systems. Sweep for drones. But the lesson is already clear. It wasn't stealth that won the night. It was simplicity. No jet engines. No satellites. No encrypted uplinks. The Zir-52 swarm had no single point of failure, no comms to jam, no signals to intercept. They were built with parts bought on eBay, programmed on Linux laptops, and tested in farmers' fields. For the price of a used Lada, Ukraine had reached 720 kilometers deep into enemy territory and executed a first-world strike using third-world tools. It's not just about Engels. It's about what comes next. If drones could do this to Russia's most secure bomber base, what's stopping them from doing it again? To Moscow? To nuclear sites? To strategic radars or leadership compounds? The Russian Air Force has flown over 4,000 long-range bomber sorties since 2022. Engels was the beating heart of that strategy. Now, it's a smoking crater with a glowing skyline. And every general in the Kremlin is suddenly asking themselves a terrifying question. If Ukraine can do this with $20,000, how much worse can it get? If this story gripped you, if it made you rethink modern warfare and the terrifying simplicity of tomorrow's threats, don't just scroll past. Like this video to push it through the algorithm. Comment below, was this the beginning of a new kind of war? Or just the preview? Subscribe for more real-world breakdowns of conflicts where microchips outsmart missiles. Because this isn't science fiction. This is already happening.